when you go to a place and you don't have any preconceived ideas about what it is, you can experience that place for what it is rather than what you're trying to make it be based on ideas you already have about it, based on what you've seen either in movies or like now Instagram.
Welcome to the VentureEtte podcast, where women from all over the world share their stories of travel, moving abroad, and creating a new life for themselves, hoping to inspire you to live out your dreams by showing you how other women did it. I'm your host, VentureEtte, Ashley.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of VentureEtte podcast. I'm Ashley, and here I share with you stories of women who have lived abroad, traveled, and how they've made that happen for themselves. And with today's guest, it's no exception. Her and her partner used to live in New York City, where they eventually had the travel bug. So they decided to move to Madrid, Spain for 2 years, and they haven't been able to stop ever since. Since then, they continue to slow travel, which we'll dive into more thanks to house sitting, which I'm so excited to talk about as that's something that I'm really curious to learn more about. And what they share with their audience on their blog is how to travel sustainably, finding the best vegan spots around the world, and how to live abroad thanks to house sitting, as they have published and shared books and guides on how to be able to live abroad thanks to house sitting. And so I'm so excited to have our guest on today, where she also has a podcast called Alternative Travelers, where they share more about sustainable travel, veganism, house sitting, and of course, travel. So I'm so pleased to welcome Sam.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Ashley. I'm so excited to talk about living abroad and traveling abroad. And I just love how you focus on personal transformation, which is huge for me, and how travel and living abroad has been super transformative for me. And yeah, I'm like very excited to chat.
I am too. And yeah, that's one thing that I've just really loved about the show so far, connecting with women like you, and how, yes, you learn so much about other places, but how you learn so much more about yourself. So I'm really curious to know more as to how travel and life abroad has helped you grow as a person, and how that helps you with what you want to contribute to the rest of the world. So I know, you travel, but originally, where are you from? Where did this kind of lust for travel all begin?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly think it really comes from my mom. She's a big traveler, and she took my sister and I abroad from a very young age. So I was super lucky to be able to experience that. And yeah, I don't know how she managed to take 2 young kids abroad many summers in a row, but I do credit my love of travel goes way back to all that. And yeah, that kind of has just driven everything that I've done. I initially moved to Spain right after college. So actually, before I met my partner, Varen, I moved to Madrid by myself because I had really wanted to live abroad. I knew that was something that I always wanted to do, because as much as I love to travel, I knew it was a completely different experience to live abroad for an extended period of time. And I also wanted to improve my Spanish, because I had studied that partially in college, but I knew that I would have to live in a place to actually gain the higher level of fluency that I wanted. So yeah, I was intending to study abroad in Madrid for a year during college, but I ended up switching majors, so that just didn't happen. And it was something I always missed out on. Most of my friends traveled abroad because my friends were all very, I think, internationally oriented. I went to school in New York City. So yeah, everyone that I knew was I traveled a lot and stuff like that. But so I was really bummed that I never got that experience of living abroad through study abroad. And I knew I had to make it happen after I graduated in some way, shape, or form.
So you chose Spain. So like you said, you were learning Spanish in the States, but what drew you to Spain? Like, why not Mexico or somewhere in South America? Like, what appealed to you about the Spanish culture?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I think most people do tend to go to Mexico or Latin America. Well, there's two things. One is that I actually have Spanish heritage. My grandmother, well, both of my grandparents on my dad's side are Puerto Rican, and my um, grandmother, her dad was like Spanish Basque. So from like the specific region of Spain, the Basque country. And so I was always interested in that. And that definitely kind of spurred my desire to want to actually learn Spanish, because I didn't at all like growing up or anything. So that was one part. And then the other part was that in college learning Spanish, all of my classes were in Spanish from like day one, which was pretty hard, but it's a great immersion. And the department was all Spanish, like from Spain. So all the history classes were focused on Spain. All of my professors were from Spain. And, so they just talked about life in Spain. And, whenever we had little um, projects or whatever, it would be about Spain. I also, so my main like major was actually anthropology and archaeology. And I did an archaeological dig in Spain one summer. So and as part of that, we did like a little road trip throughout Spain. And it was so fast though, like sleeping in a different hostel every night. I kind of just got the barest taste, and I wanted more, definitely. And it just kind of happened in that I learned through one of my professors about a program for teaching English in Spain. And he had always talked about it as like an option to continue, like live there and stuff. So he helped me, he wrote a letter of recommendation and whatever. So I ended up getting into that program after I graduated. And then, so it was kind of just, all right, well, here we go.
That's such a great way to be able to move abroad anywhere, is through teaching English. I mean, that's how I moved abroad in the first place as well. And so, I mean, you first moved to Spain and, to teach. And did you experience like any culture shock? Did you feel like you were quote unquote home in a sense? Like, how was that experience like going there on your own and like living in a new country?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. I don't think I fully knew what I was getting into. I was just like, I'm a type of person, I'm just like, I'm gonna just go ahead and try it and see how it works. And my partner Varen always just likes to tell me that I like to learn things the hard way. But
Yeah.
I just like to learn through experience, even if it does not end out as well as I hoped. But in this case, it did turn out super well. It was hard though. The program that I did, it's called the Auxiliar de Conversación program, like conversation assistant program in
Mhm.
Spain. And it's super popular. And but it doesn't like give you any help at all. Like basically they're like, this is your school, show up on this day, have fun finding an apartment. Like it was all like you did everything yourself, which was scary. It just threw you right in there. I mean, I was looking for apartments in Spanish, and it was just like a just throw yourself in the deep end kind of thing. The good thing about that program is that there is a really strong community that helps each other, because like the program itself doesn't. So that was really good. And it's been running long enough that there are resources and people to help and whatnot. But yeah, it was also difficult because at the time I was still with like my college boyfriend, and so he had moved to China to teach English. So like that was long distance, and that was like something I was concerned about. But I was just like, I'm gonna regret not taking this opportunity. So I just knew I had to try it no matter what. And I think that's what I always try to encourage people now, teaching how to travel in a different way or whatever, is like, just try it, just try it, and you'll see how it goes. And that, I mean, like I said, that's just how I like to do things. But I really do think it will work out in the end, and it has for me. So
That's good. It's because I feel like you kind of have like that go-getter mindset, It's just like, I really want this, so I will make it happen, like no matter the cost. And like I do like commend you that you still like stuck with it. Like I can only imagine like being in a foreign country, because I've had to do that too, like not in Spain, but like in other countries where I had to find my own place and stuff on my own. And it's kind of difficult when the country operates in a different way, and there's also like that possible like language barrier. But it's funny that you said that you were a conversation assistant, because that's what I was too in Catalonia. But so I thought you were going to say that you stayed with the host family, because that's what I did. So I can only imagine like your first time going abroad, and it's like, oh, you're like really like on your own to like fend for
oh
yourself to find accommodation. Like,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, no, I for whatever reason, the host family thing never super appealed to me. I honestly like don't know why. Maybe it's just because even though it is such a great immersive experience to do a host family experience, I mean, that's the best way. You're hearing Spanish all the time. I mean, the place that I ended up finding, the first place I lived in Madrid, was with a Spanish professor at one of the schools that I taught at. So we spoke only Spanish at home, and that was really great for my learning. I don't I don't know why I just never entertained the host family possibility. I think maybe I just wanted my own like space, kind of, in a way. Like maybe I was just afraid of being in a family. Like I in my family, I didn't grow up with like a big family or like a very I don't know the word. I think just that whole like being in a host family all the time and doing things together, maybe it just didn't appeal to me for whatever reason. I'm thinking about it now, and I'm working through it in my brain right now, and I'm like, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't something that I thought about. Maybe because I was in Madrid, the big city, and I wanted to be living that life or whatever.
No, that makes perfect sense, because I'll be honest, I was supposed to be in a host family in that program for 9 months, and I only ended up staying for 3, but for that reason. Like
Mm,
even though I come from a family that's very close and stuff, I thought, oh, maybe being with another family abroad might make it easier. And in a way it did, but like you said, like you still kind of had to commit your time with them. You really needed to also kind of tell them where you're kind of going, like not like a little kid, but like you're there to help teach like the children there like English as well. So if you're going to be out of the house, they kind of want to know a little bit. And so I can totally understand as to why that didn't really appeal for you, because over time for me, I was like, this is great. The family's lovely, but like I really do need my own space. So I feel like, yeah, it really just kind of depends for what kind of experience you're going for. So that's great that you knew at the time that exactly the kind of experience you wanted, instead of
yeah.
like doing something that you would later regret. So
Yeah. Well, it's funny because now that you mention it, that's interesting to hear you say that you end up leaving after a few months. And that's actually what I ended up doing too, with the first living situation I was in, because it did end up being too much. Like I just felt like she was maybe mothering me too much, or it felt smothering a bit. Like my mom is very much like independent, like do your own thing, kind of very hands off. So that's like what I was used to. And I had the woman I stayed with was super sweet and super nice, and she would like leave me like food and like if she made something and whatever. But like it was that like, if I was out late, she would be wondering where I was, or oh, you left some crumbs on the table and stuff like that. And it was very clean. I was just like, or I could only have, if a friend was visiting from somewhere else, they could only stay like a night or two. And I'm like, well, if I have a friend visiting from the US, they're obviously not going to stay for 2 nights. So it was just all that kind of stuff. And I ended up leaving after a few months, and I moved in with two Spanish women more around my age. And that was great. although I was like expecting us to all be like roomies and just like hang out all the time and like speaking Spanish, it was going to be great. And they were really cool, but they were, working all the time because at the time, this was 2013, 2014, the Spanish economy was really, really terrible. And it was the topic on everyone's mind. And so my roommates were like working two jobs just to get by because the pay was so low and stuff like that. So I didn't necessarily work out that way because of them working a lot, which like sucked for them too, obviously, like, but I still keep in touch with one of them, so that's cool. It worked out.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like even though you weren't like roomies at the time, I guess like long term you still have, that connection, with someone in Spain. But I want to say, I think that's so funny how you mentioned how the woman got a little annoyed about the crumbs thing because my host mom did too.
Oh my
you
god.
know? Yeah, it's like I was so clean. But that's the thing. It's just like, don't get me wrong. I mean, host families and stuff are great, but sometimes, yeah, as you're living with other adults and people who are older, almost like a mother figure, like that kind of interaction can happen. And so, but at least you were able to, get out of it and find like other like roommates in another spot where you had more of that independence, and it seems like it worked out even better for you.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the thing. Like, even though you're abroad, it doesn't mean like you're stuck. You can still move around and still make it work. So I mean, you were in Spain, and what do you feel like was kind of the turning point where you kind of felt like everything was kind of okay and you felt like even more comfortable? Do you feel like it took you a few months or?
I don't know. That's a great question. Yeah, definitely a few months longer, honestly. Because my time in Spain, I lived there for 3 years, but it was kind of split up. So I lived there for a year directly after college by myself, and then I came back to the States, met my current partner, and then we moved to Spain together. And so that was like another 2 years, and that was separate. But my first year there, I felt like in many ways it was not exactly me doing study abroad because it was more autonomous than like in a study abroad program, but it was definitely, the first, I was like such a hardcore student. Like I was so busy. I was like I was a college athlete, and I was working job, and I was like just studying so hard because I was a perfectionist. So I didn't feel like I ever let myself enjoy things. I certainly had great experience in college as well, but like it was just, I felt like my first year in Spain was more about that enjoyment and going out more and all that kind of stuff. And my second time in Spain, I felt way more comfortable, like it was home. Like when I came back, I never actually thought I was going to live in Madrid again. I think a variety of things in my personal life, like that long distance relationship I had ended, and that was really difficult. And just other things, I didn't enjoy teaching really. And, but yeah, when I came back to Spain and I wasn't teaching and I was not in a long distance relationship, then those things I could appreciate the place more. And then I started to create a community in what I was doing. And I think those things really helped, which they're not necessarily related to the place at all. But also, yeah, just of course, as my language got better, then I felt more comfortable. And as I had more of a community, I felt more comfortable. And as I got to know the city, then more the second and third year was, yeah, feeling more grounded.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that kind of happens naturally, like over time. Because I feel like for me too, like having lived abroad for a few years, like, yeah, in the beginning, like you said, it's more fun going out because it's like new and exciting. But then over time, like once you have more of like your community and you know more about what you want to be doing, it's kind of like you have like I don't know, like this groundness. I can't even think of the word, but you just feel like you said, like more comfortable, and you don't really feel the need to always go like out and about because you have your community, you have things going for you that you can work on. So that's really nice to see that how over time that developed more for you. But so you said you did that. You've lived in Spain on and off for like 3 years or so. And so then did you, after that, did you come back to the US? I mean, how did you transition from life in Spain to eventually like slow travel? And also for people that don't know, like what is slow travel?
Yeah, so quickly, yeah, slow travel is I always like to say that it's more of a mindset than a period of time necessarily, because I think people, especially Americans with very short vacation times, think, oh, I don't have a month off, I can't slow travel. But I would say that you definitely can. You could slow travel in a weekend. It's just more about uh, not packing your itinerary full of a million things per day that you need to check off, and just being more open to whatever might come your way, literally like moving slowly through the landscape instead of like hopping in a cab or lift or whatever to each landmark that you want to get to. It's walking around, seeing what you might come across or who you might strike up a conversation with. Maybe biking around if you're comfortable. We love biking around cities. I know I was not comfortable doing that for a while, but I cut my teeth biking in New York. So that kind of, after that, everywhere else is fine. So yeah, just being, literally just slowing down your travel a bit. And instead of maybe going on the typical like Euro trip of, okay, I have 2 weeks, I'm going to fly to a different city every 3 days, instead of doing that, like choosing to spend all of your time in one place and just getting to know a place in a deeper way, is kind of what it's all about.
No, I love that. I honestly have never heard it be described as like a mindset kind of thing. So that was really like intriguing. So do you feel like this was something like you've always done because you did live in Spain for a period of time, or is that something you kind of started to do like over time?
Yeah, it's definitely over time. Yeah, when I was living in Spain, I didn't, I guess, think of it in that way, but now I do, that I valued spending longer in a place. And even when I was living there, I knew a lot of people who were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm living in Europe. I'm going to fly to a different country every weekend," because we had 3-day weekends, which was so luxurious. Um, and I was never really interested in doing that. I wanted to discover Madrid, and I wanted to discover Spain. I mean, Spain is just such an incredible, diverse place. And Madrid in the center, you can get to everywhere. The train system is some of the best in the world. So I would once a month with some friends go to a different region of Spain, and check that out. And that was so great. I mean, I love Spain so much, and I could just, and it was just also the fact that like I knew the language. It was easier to connect. And I've had so many conversations with like, little old Spanish men in like different villages in the middle of nowhere that they clearly don't speak English. And I wouldn't have these interactions with them if I didn't speak Spanish, even though I might find them difficult to understand at times, in these smaller villages. But yeah, so I guess, yeah, I didn't think of what I was doing at that time as slow travel, but I think it was. And it definitely did kind of grow and develop over time. And a big influence in that was my partner, Varen. So when we met, I had just come back from Spain. I did kind of want to stay, but I didn't want to keep teaching. It just really, I was not happy teaching, and I didn't know how to deal with that because everyone else that I knew was staying, and it was such a good, easy setup. Really, I was like, why would I say no to this? But I just knew I couldn't teach in the classroom for another year. So I came back to New York and we met, and some of our first conversations were about travel, and he was lamenting how much he had liked to travel, but he couldn't do it anymore. And I was just like, why? Like, why not? Why not travel? But he was more of a slow travel mindset always. And because in my head, I was going to come back to New York, save a bunch of money, and I wanted to do like an around the world trip um, for a year, because that's what my parents had done for their honeymoon, and that had always like inspired me. I was like, wow, that sounds so cool. I want to travel around the world for a year. So that was something I always wanted to do. And I mentioned it to him. I was like, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. And his kind of attitude was, well, then you're just going to come back to where you were in the first place. Like, what if you could just extend that travel instead of like saving up, $5,000 for the round the world flight ticket or whatever, like just stretch it out over time. And he's just the type of person that likes to be very unhurried and just really savor things and doesn't like to be rushed. And that's still a dynamic that we have today. So he certainly influenced me a lot in that. Because I don't think on my own, I think on my own, I probably would have done a around the world trip and probably would have been moving around faster. I mean, I don't know, obviously, what that would have looked like, but yeah, he was a big influence there.
Now, I love how he had you question being like, so like what if you could extend that? I love how he said that like if you just did that, you would just go back to where you were, which is like so true. And so was that where the idea of house sitting like came about, or like how did that happen? Like what happened next?
Yeah, that it was kind of, I mean, we were kind of trying to figure out how to leave New York. I had the worst reverse culture shock ever. It was you because you'd asked earlier about whether I had culture shock going to Spain, and I think maybe a little bit. I can't remember it now because Spain feels so normal to me now. Certainly there were things, like things being closed for siesta or the long lunches and stuff that were like 3 hours. At first I was like, what the hell? Come on, I don't want to just sit here. But so that was probably one thing, and just how much slower the pace is in terms of like I don't know, bureaucracy, which is like something you have to contend with. I'm sure you could understand. But yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, so I just could never readjust to the pace in New York. And I had very quickly gotten a job, and I thought it was going to be a writing job, writing about travel. And it like very quickly turned into an event planning job. And it just wasn't for me. And I couldn't find a good living situation. I moved like every 3 months in New York, and it's just so difficult to find an affordable place to live that's not terrible. Basically, it's just really difficult. And yeah, Baron was also like, had been contemplating leaving for a long time. And so I think I found out about house sitting through a travel blog, and I just started looking into it. And I was looking into other options too, like work exchange or work away or stuff like that. But it just worked out with house sitting. We were only applying to like long-term opportunities because we knew we wanted to try it for a long time. We didn't want to just go somewhere for a weekend. And we wanted to see if we would like house sitting and if it would work for us. And we ended up doing our first one in Salt Lake City, Utah. We like Skyped with the pet owner on New Year's Day, which I love. I think it's so just fitting, new beginnings on New Year's. And he was like, you guys sound great. Let's do it, basically. And so a month and a half later, we arrived in Salt Lake City, and we were there for 3 months. And he was absolutely amazing. He really set us on the right course for house sitting. We were his first house sitters. So it was just super cool. We loved it. He was just so cool. His cat was amazing. I loved that cat. And the apartment was incredible. It was like a luxury condo in downtown Salt Lake City. Like, it's so ridiculous. It had a hot tub on the roof of the building.
Wow.
And yeah. And you had Salt Lake is really beautiful because it's surrounded by mountains. So you could just sit in the hot tub and see the mountains. And then there's like a pool in the building and all this kind of stuff that like we weren't even anticipating, which we just were enjoying being there. I mean, I love to swim, so I was really happy about that. But like apart from that, it was just really cool to be in another place. And I think we were just both decompressing from working so much that we just really enjoyed it. We explored the state. The guy we were house sitting for lent us his car, and he was like, "You guys got to go to southern Utah. That's where the national parks are." And he's like, "It's the most gorgeous landscape in the world." And this is a guy who travels like a ton, and he was like, "Please take the cat on a road trip. The cat loves road trips, and you have to go." And I was like, "This is ridiculous." Um,
I love how trusting he was of you guys. But so I kind of want to take it back because honestly, your first experience house sitting, I mean, like, wow, like what a dream. But I just want to kind of clarify like what house sitting is because it's not
mm.
just like sitting for a house, obviously, but you do have to take care of a pet normally, right? Is that how the exchange works?
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad you brought it back to explaining it because I know I was talking about how great this house is. People are like, "Oh my gosh, I want to do that right now."
Yeah.
And it's like we just got really lucky with that situation. I mean, we were also being very particular with the house sits we looked for. But yeah, just to clarify, the house sitting that we do is on exchange. So basically, the house sitter is taking care of the pet owner's pet and their home. And yeah, there is a pet like pretty much 98% of the time. Um, we've only done one house sit without a pet. It's actually for the same guy that we house sit for, this one that I was just mentioning. Unfortunately, his cat had died, and we just house sit for him at the beginning of this year, and he hadn't gotten a new cat yet. So that was no pets, which was actually, we ended up missing animals a lot, and we were like, please adopt a cat for next time.
Aw.
But yeah, so it is important to note that there's is pretty much always pets, because sometimes I actually get this question quite a lot, that people want to house sit but they don't want to do it with pets, and I'm like, well, I don't think you're going to be very successful, because there's not a lot of house sits with no pets. That's the main reason why people want to get pet sitters, because they want to travel, but obviously it would be very expensive, especially if you're taking a longer trip, to pay for your cat, your dog to go to a kennel or something like that. So they're saving a ton of money on pet care, and then their pet is happier. So that's the draw for the pet owners, and obviously then the draw for the house sitter is you get free accommodation. Well, free in quotes, because obviously you're not paying for a place to stay, but you're, kind of paying with your labor and your time and your energy, and taking care of the animals and the property and stuff like that.
Which in the end is still a bargain. I mean, especially like if you work remotely and you're not having to worry about paying for accommodation, that's still, I feel in my eyes, like a huge saving, like for the person that's sitting.
Oh
So
yeah.
I so I also want to clarify too, because I've seen a little bit about house sitting, but you do this through a platform, right? I don't know if there's like one or if there's quite a few different like platforms where you sign up and there's like some sort of membership. Is that right? Like,
Yeah, so there's a few. The biggest one, and the one that we use, is called Trusted House Sitters, and it's the biggest one worldwide, and it's in my opinion just the best one all around for a number of reasons. It's just the most user friendly, and again, it's the biggest one, so they have the most house sits available, and we were just like, well, we're just going to go for the biggest and the best, basically. And so you do pay a yearly membership fee, but like you house sit literally one night and you've already recouped that membership. So it's like $100 something a year. And yeah, I mean, even if you're not a full-time house sitter like we are, if you house sit occasionally, if you house sit for a weekend, house sits vary in length, you're going to get that savings back pretty much immediately. So it's just basically kind of like a matchmaking website. It's not like they don't vouch for either side. So each side really has to kind of do their due diligence and ask questions. And it's really about finding the right match um, for you as the house sitter. So it's really on the house sitter. Well, and it's on both sides to ask questions to make sure that everyone's on the same page about what the responsibilities are and just everything from there. So I think that's also important to clarify, because sometimes people think that they just join one of these websites and they're just going to have a house sit like offered to them the next day. And that's not how it works. There's a lot that goes into it, and you have to, just be strategic about it. You have to apply to house sits. You have to have a profile. There's a lot that goes into it. So I think people have an idea that they're going to start house sitting tomorrow and it's going to be so great and it's going to be so easy. And it doesn't have to be super hard, but it does take some intentionality and some time and some patience. Importantly, some patience for sure, because we applied to a bunch of house sits before we ended up landing our first one.
It's like any other job, really. Like, I mean, if you want to do something like that, it's going to require some work. And of course, like you said, like creating a profile and doing your due diligence and stuff. And like, especially kind of having like interview style, like conversations. So like, it makes sense that you would have to put in a bit of work, but I feel like the reward like is really worth it to be able to stay in a place for several months with like, like in your situation, beautiful view, jacuzzi, and using a car. So, I mean, I feel like if you do the work right, I mean, it's worth it.
Oh yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah, I just put that out there because it's just something I get asked all the time. People don't put the work in, and then they think that house sitting can't work for them, and I'm just like, well, did you do this? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, that's that's kind of what you need to do. It's an amazing experience and it's an awesome thing to do, but yeah, it doesn't just fall out of the sky.
Exactly. But it feels like, all the work that you and your partner put in was well worth it because you booked this first amazing place with a cat that you like grew to love. So then what happened like after? Did you do like more within the US, or were you like, okay, we're ready to make this international? What happened?
Yeah, so that was after we left New York. We just wanted to try it. We were house sitting, and while that house sit was happening, we put the wheels in motion for like a backup plan in case we like didn't like house sitting. So, which obviously we ended up liking it, but the wheels were already in motion, and this like backup plan, so to speak, was going to Spain. So we were just talking about different things that we could do. And because the thing was, like, at the time I was freelancing, but my partner, he's a teacher or was. And so he working remotely wasn't a thing that he could do kind of at the time. And I know a lot of people now teach English online. We didn't realize that at the time. And anyway, he wasn't super enthralled with that idea because he really likes to be in the class, like in person with his students. So yeah, it was like not financially viable necessarily to keep house sitting. I'm sure we would have figured it out as we went along, but I was like, hey, why don't you just apply to this teaching program in Spain? I already did it, and I'm sure you would get in, and then we could just move to Spain and you'd have an income and I could just keep freelancing and we could travel and house sit while we're also living there as well. So that's what we ended up doing. So we had done a stint of house sitting in the US. So that was in Utah. Then we also house sit in New York a couple of times. And then we moved to Spain. We were there for 2 years and we house sat while we were living in Spain. So that enabled us. It was just so easy to get around Europe. So we house sat throughout Spain. And so, yeah, we house sat like in Italy and Germany. And then one summer we house sat all the way through the UK. So that was really cool. So that time really enabled us to do a lot more house sits. So these were like shorter term house sits, like a few days or a week or a couple weeks, not the more long term ones, because they were like more limited to his vacation time. So we were just using it as a way to subsidize our, accommodation costs while we were traveling. So that's why I always like to highlight that too, because a lot of people see us now, we're full-time house sitters. And that happened after our second year in Spain. He could have renewed for a third year, but at that time, our website was already starting to take off. Like we had started our blog on that first house sit in Utah, just as like I think most blogs start, which is as a journal to keep in touch with friends and family, like what are you doing, kind of thing. And over time, it became more than that, and we were pulling in income through that. So we were like, okay, if we go into full-time house sitting and we're not paying rent, then we can really devote all our time to this because we were making enough through our website to be able to do that. And we had some savings and stuff like that. So and he also was like, yeah, I'm just not feeling doing this program for another year. So all these kind of things came together. And as much as we loved Spain, still love Spain, we really wanted to focus on our own projects and do our own things. And we had written a Madrid vegan guidebook right when we were leaving Spain too. So we wanted to like just get the word out there about that. We really wanted to just focus on our projects. So that was the impetus for us going back into full-time house sitting. And also we just wanted to do it too. Like we wanted to travel in a slower way and experience more of the world. So yeah, I kind of like to share that because people see us as full-time house sitters and they think that's the only way to house sit. And that's definitely not the case. You can be a full-time house sitter, or you can live in one place and use it as a way to subsidize your accommodation costs elsewhere. And that can be a really good way to get started if you want to do full-time house sitting day, or just you really like living in one place. You don't want to be a nomad, but you want to try it out. So I always like to kind of share that because there's many different ways that you can do house sitting.
No, I love that. Yeah, that there's like many different like options in order to house sit, and that it doesn't have to be like a permanent thing. And that's the thing with like travel or like moving abroad. Like, yes, it's, in a way, it's kind of a drastic thing, but you can always go back home. You can always make it a temporary thing if you want. It doesn't have to be like this all or nothing kind of thing. So I'm glad that like you clarified that. And also, what do you feel like you really gain? I mean, besides like, saving money and stuff, but what else do you feel like you gain from house sitting compared to just like renting a home or an apartment in another country? Like, what are some other benefits that really draws you more to house sitting rather than just saving money?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that too, because there really are so many benefits. I mean, one of them I think is that it has opened our eyes to places that we never would have considered otherwise. Like we are very flexible with where we'll go, and I think that's the best way to approach it. Like if you it's going to be difficult slash potentially not possible if you're like, I want to house sit in Paris between June 5th and June 7th, and I want to find a house sit for that date. Like you're setting yourself up for potential disappointment because that you don't set the dates. The pet and homeowner set the dates. So there might not be someone looking for a house sit at that time. So you got to be really flexible, and that we always went into it being flexible. And so yeah, we just ended up in places that we wouldn't have considered otherwise. Like, I mean, Salt Lake City, when we first went there and when we went back there this year, people are like, why Salt Lake City? Like it's not, number one travel destination, but we kind of like that because when you go to a place and you don't have any preconceived ideas about what it is, you can experience that place for what it is rather than what you're trying to make it be based on ideas you already have about it, based on what you've seen either in movies or like now Instagram or whatever. So it's we've gone to places that we never would have considered going to before. So that's definitely a big one. And then another one is that it gives you a local connection in the place before you even get there. So we're all about, connecting with locals, and when like with house sitting, you literally already know some, like that's what it's all about. So we've had people just share stuff about the place that they live or cool places that we never would have learned about otherwise. I remember we were in house sitting in Granada in Spain, and it was an incredible house sit, and the couple took us out for tapas like the night we arrived, and they were leaving the next morning, and they were like, oh my gosh, you guys are vegan, like I don't know what vegan tapas I can find. Oh no. And they were like so concerned because they wanted to like bring us out for some nice tapas. And but then the woman thought about it longer, and she was like, no, I know some places. And she brought us to like 5 different places that had vegan tapas. And I was like, wow, you like, and these were not places that I would have ever expected would have something vegan on the menu. And I was like really surprised that she knew so many places, but these were like really local hole in the wall spots that we wouldn't have necessarily gone to otherwise. And it was just really great. And yeah, an experience we wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's really been true for so many of our house sits. Just the people we've met and the experiences we've had just is such a richer experience than just, booking a hotel, I think.
I love that like you said, like you already have like a local connection like before you even arrive, which, makes you feel like warm and welcome, but like a true like authentic experience because you're in this place, like you said, you wouldn't normally choose. And yeah, and also like I feel like this really kind of ties in with like the slow travel that you talk about, like with like the mindset thing, like the fact that you have to be like so flexible in terms of like the dates that you'd be going to a place, and also just really just kind of going with the flow. Like you said, like, this family or these people are so excited to have you there. And, even though some things were kind of like on a whim, you're just kind of going with it. So I feel like that just really ties in with the slow travel that you and your partner do, which I think is amazing. And so I also kind of want to clarify as well is that when you're traveling to all these places, you're also paying for your airfare. It's not like these house sitters or these people that you're house sitting for are paying for your transportation, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know some house sitters like might develop a relationship with like repeat clients, and they might eventually pay for your airfare. Like, I really want you to come, so like wherever you are, I'm going to pay for you to come to where I am. But generally, yeah, no, you're paying for getting there. You're also paying for your groceries while you're there, you're dining out, any entertainment, like all of your expenses apart from accommodation, uh, you're paying for. So that's why, yeah, it's important to have a source of income, either like a remote income or savings, or like if you're doing this full time, I mean, because if you have a job and are doing it on the weekends, obviously then you have income. That's why house sitting has been really popular with the retired community, because they already have like a pension or social security or whatever, and so they don't have to worry about that. And house sitting is a way for them to travel like they've always wanted, and stuff like that. So, but it is growing in like the younger demographic of digital nomads or people who are just interested in these kind of alternative modes of travel. And I also think with the pandemic, and more people than ever are working from home. And so I think more companies are also going to be going remote indefinitely. I mean, I'm sure there'll be some that will eventually come back to the office or whatever, come back to the office part-time, but I think there's going to be way more flexibility in terms of working from home, working remotely, all this kind of stuff. So that's why I'm also really passionate about getting the word out about house sitting, because there are so many more people who do have that flexibility now. And, in the future, post-pandemic world, there'll be that many more people that can do house sitting or get house sitters too.
No, I completely agree that there is a huge shift right now in the way people work and like where they work. So I'm also really like intrigued to see like more as well as to how many more people are going to be doing like slow travel or doing house sitting or just kind of going to other countries and being able to work from there. So I'm also kind of just really excited to see like for what's to come. So I also kind of want to talk a little bit too about like now, like did you come back to the States in these last 2 months, or are you still like abroad making it work?
Yeah, well, we actually were in the US when all this happened. We actually have been mostly in the US for the past like 2 years because we had been abroad in Spain for a couple years and we kind of wanted to spend some time back in the US. So we just kind of like built from there. We had already planned to be back in the US. Also, like the US is obviously so huge. And I personally have always discredited traveling in the US. I was always like, I got to travel. That means getting on a plane and crossing the ocean or something like that. But that's another way that my partner, Varen, has really changed my mind. He's great at challenging me, which is a good thing, I think.
I can see that. Yeah.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. But there's so many incredible places here, just all our national park system, just so many cool cities. So, and house sitting is actually pretty big here. So I was like, okay, we've been in Europe for a couple years. I'm like ready to explore the US more. And so we were house sitting around the US. We were in Portland for a while. And then we were in North Carolina, Florida. We even house sat in the US Virgin Islands, which that was a really interesting and cool experience. And then, so we were house sitting in Salt Lake City again for the same guy that we did our first house sit for at the beginning of the year. And that pretty much ended right as like the lockdown happened, and we had lined up a 3-month house sit in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and that got canceled like the week beforehand. Obviously, like no, it wasn't anyone's fault, and the couple were so nice and stuff, and they were like, we'd love to have you back in the future when this is all over and let us know if we can help. So yeah, we ended up renting. So the guy we house set for in Salt Lake City had an Airbnb apartment. It was like a basement of the place that we were house sitting. So the house was on the top, and then there was like a basement Airbnb, like renovated, obviously. But no one was in there because everyone had canceled because no one was traveling. So like we got like a really super reduced rent on that, and we stayed there for a couple months because we were just, no one knew what was going on at the time. You know, this was March and April, and no one knew which end was up and stuff. But then stuff started to pick up again in Utah because they never, like, travel started to pick up again because they never reached like high case numbers because they had shut down like very early, which they did a good job about. And then I think they got too confident in that, like, oh, COVID's not going to come to us. So they opened up again. And we all see how that goes, given how their numbers have been over there. But yeah, we had to, basically, the guy was like, yeah, like, I kind of want to open up the Airbnb again to travelers because I'm getting a lot of requests. So I'm going to have to open it back up or whatever. And that kind of sucked. But in the end, it was good because we needed a longer term place to be, because as I think we're all kind of realizing now, this is kind of not going away anytime soon, unfortunately. So, and long-term house sitting isn't really, at least in the US, you know, I think elsewhere in Europe and places that more have things under control, it's starting to pick back up again, but we can't go there anyway. So, we wanted to come back to New York State, which is like where our technical residence is, like basically our home turf. Like we have friends and family here. If, you know, one of us were to get sick, we do have health insurance here. So we're in Buffalo, New York right now, renting a place, which is a adjustment, but because we have no pets,
Oh
and that's
no.
very sad. And obviously then we're paying rent, so that's sad. but you know, it's the right thing to do right now, and given how everything's so up and down, we just like, basically we were like, well, we could try to go back into full-time house sitting, but like the long-term house sits aren't really there. Like people are maybe going away for a weekend or a week, but they're not really going away for the long houses that we do. And it's just too disruptive, or would be really hard to line up house sits back to back, just because the people aren't, traveling, understandably so. So we're just using this time to, yeah, hunker down, and it's a different kind of adventure. I think being in a place, we're pretty flexible with our like nomadism. Like, yeah, we were bummed about what happened and house sitting being canceled, not house sitting, but we're adapting to it, and there's new things to do and stuff like that that you couldn't do traveling full time. So that's kind of how we're approaching it.
No, I have to say, just wow, like you really do have to be very flexible in terms of like where you're going to be staying and stuff. Because like, yeah, like I can understand, like you think you're going to be in a place for a while and then you have to like pick up and leave suddenly. But since you've been doing this for many years, I know you're kind of used to it. But yeah, I think that's just kind of one advantage about being a traveler and like a nomad, is that these kind of things do tend to happen. And so you can't help but just, kind of go with the flow. But I'm glad that for you and your partner, you've been able to, adjust okay. And you were able to find a place to stay, I mean, for the time being. And I would hope that, you guys can house sit again soon, but I just don't know how soon. But so you said like, there's
Yeah.
things that you can do now that you're not, since you're not like traveling or like moving around so much. So what are some things that you've been doing more so now and taking advantage of now that you have like a place to stay for the time being?
Yeah, I was just thinking, this is so nerdy, but I started brewing my own kombucha.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that is like full on, but yeah, so that, I mean, that's one thing, because that's a long process. It takes time. You need certain things and whatnot. So that's been cool. I've also just I things that I've been needing to get around to, such as like going through my stuff in storage. I don't have a lot of stuff at all, because moving so much, you kind of like pare it down over time. And it's been something that I've always been thinking of, that I need to get to, but it's always like on the back burner whenever I'm back in New York, because I'm trying to see people. This is where my community is, so I'm just running around, and I'm not like, don't want to spend time going through boxes. So now that we're in one place, I'm doing that, and that's not very glamorous, but it's a good thing, and it feels like good to do, and very like, we're kind of doing things to like set ourselves up and be fully prepared for when we do go back on the road, like, whenever that happens. And yeah, like where we're living in the city of Buffalo, like full on in the city, but next to us there is like a little greenhouse and farm, little mini farm. Honestly, it's really strange. It's not like we're in farmland at all. It's like a city farm, I guess. It's very small. It's not like there's livestock. There's just like produce and stuff. And so we've been helping the guy out with that. And then we get like some fresh produce, and that's been cool. And yeah, just getting to know our neighbors, like all that kind of stuff that I think people take for granted. Maybe living in one place, that when you're moving around a lot, you don't necessarily spend time on as much. So, yeah, and also podcasting too. I mean, we started our podcast during the pandemic, and that's been a cool thing to focus on. Obviously, we can do that anywhere as well, but I think it's been good to be kind of in one place to get the routine down and that kind of stuff. So yeah, just kind of like planting all these seeds and enjoying doing all this kind of stuff right now. And because I think when we eventually do go back on the road again, we'll be like, okay, we've been working really hard on our projects, like, full out vacation mode. So that's what I want to do whenever travel and house sitting and stuff is possible again. I just want to like, treat ourselves and go and not worry about anything.
No, yeah, I love that you're really just using this time to kind of pursue more of your interests and really slowing down. And like you said, getting to know other people around you. So that's great that, you're making most of this time for now. But I also kind of want to touch a little bit about, you talk, you're also like vegan as well. So do you feel like house sitting and going to all these places that you said you probably would have never gone to, do you feel like that's been like easy to still find like vegan options, or cooking yourself, like obviously like really good vegan food. Like how has that been?
It's funny. I keep bringing this back to Salt Lake City, but it's just such a good example. Like we never would have gone to Salt Lake City. And Salt Lake City is like such an underrated vegan heaven destination. It really is. Like they have so many amazing, like the diversity of their options. Like they have a vegan French patisserie. They have like a vegan Mexican buffet, like authentic Mexican food, but vegan. And they have like donut place, like they have like just every place is so different. They have like a vegan Vietnamese place. They're just amazing food there. And no one, I love talking about that because no one would ever
I
imagine.
wouldn't have.
Yeah, right, right. It's just like, and that's honestly like one of the reasons why we'll always go back to Salt Lake City. It's just like literally just to eat the food. So yeah, it's just I know a lot of vegans love to go to like the vegan hotspots that are well known, like, you know, New York, Portland, Berlin, London, all those kind of Bali, all those kind of places. But we kind of like to also find um, on they're little gems, little vegan gems or options in traditional food wherever we go. And if there aren't good options there, then yeah, we'll just cook at home and just be flexible in that way and maybe treat ourselves to more things eating at home or that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, house sitting, that's the other thing is like, because we're not spending money on accommodations, we'll just spend more money on eating out. So it kind of
Which is the best thing ever.
exactly. I mean, when we were house sitting in Portland, we just ate like, cause that's where you are, right? You're in
Yes.
Portland?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. We just I swear, I think we ate out like twice a day there. It was just ridiculous. Like it was not a sustainable thing in the long term, but it was really fun.
No, yeah, that's what I just really do love about travel is like, yes, the culture and the places you get to see, but I just also especially love the food. So that's great that you've been able to find like some amazing spots, and even like ones that you would never think of, like Salt Lake City. Like I definitely would have never guessed in a million years that that is a great vegan hotspot. So now I'm kind of curious to go and check it out. Um, and then also, I want to just talk briefly a little bit about kind of like sustainable travel, because that's something that you and your partner talk a lot about. And so, how has that been for you, like traveling sustainably while house sitting? Like, what are some things that you guys make an effort to in order to travel sustainably?
Yeah, it's an ever like evolving process. Um, well, again, house sitting find is a really sustainable way to travel because you're just reusing someone's house, like you're sharing economy kind of stuff. So often people will be like, yeah, use whatever you want in the fridge. Like we just it will or like in the cupboards and stuff, and we'll I don't know, maybe this is like weird, but we'll just like eat the stuff that like is like about to expire or like expired, like pasta, whatever that's already expired, but who cares about pasta and stuff like that. We know like they don't even realize they have anymore. And I feel I'm like, I'm doing my part to like reduce food waste, but maybe that's just me thinking that way. But like, also, yeah, like slow travel just ties into slow travel. Like the longer that you are in a place, the lower your carbon footprint is because you're not flying around all the time. And we try to like minimize our flights as much as possible. We're not like on the no flying camp at all because I think that's really difficult, especially coming from the US, like such a big country, even just to get across. So, but we do try to minimize like our flights. Like we will go to like maybe one country and try to house sit around there or whatever. So we do that. And we also do one of the things that I do is I just kind of carry around some things with me in my little like day bag that will help me reduce waste on the go. So like I have a little water bottle, but also reusable utensils. I have like some reusable forks and a little knife and some straws and like a reusable napkin and like a little container in case like I want to get a pastry to go or something like that. So normally we like to sit and eat dine in at a place, but like sometimes you're running around and you want stuff to help you, so you don't have to like take the plastic forks and the do get a reusable napkin, then you don't have to throw that kind of stuff out. Just like little things like that. I think it's about building these habits over time, because I know when people think about sustainable travel, they think it's so overwhelming or it's so difficult, or it's just like they just put it out of their minds. Like it's something it's just too much to think about. And I just always try to encourage people to like make little changes along the way. It doesn't have to be like, okay, I'm zero waste now or something like that, like overnight. At least that isn't how we do it. We just try to always be like, okay, how can we choose the more sustainable choice here? Yeah, we normally we like to stay in cities more. So we normally don't need a car at all. I mean, like when we got use of that car in Salt Lake City, that was really nice for like going and exploring the mountains, but we didn't need it for like daily life. Like we would take it out maybe once on the weekend or something like that. So all these little things just kind of add up to being a more kind of like conscious traveler.
No, I love how you said it's not one of those things that you need to just like cut everything out overnight and stuff. It's like a process and just picking up little habits. Like you said, like I, like to travel with like my metal straw, and also making sure that I don't use like the plastic cutlery if I am taking takeout. Like just little things can really go a long way. And I really like how you said that. And that's really just kind of important to know that something small can also be really helpful. And also too, I saw like on your website how you guys try not to buy from Amazon, that there's some other sites that you try using when you want to like buy things. So what are some sites that you recommend that if you wanted to get these kind of like reusable, like, straws or utensils or just anything, what are some places that people can go to shop for?
That's a great question. That's like a recent thing that I've been getting into, because like normally, traveling around and house sitting, the house is fully stocked and we don't need to buy like cleaning products or this or that. But like being in our own place, we found ourselves like having to get more of these household items or like just whatever that we need to be in a house, or these more like sustainable products like you mentioned and stuff like that. So I went a deep dive into I always knew Amazon was kind of like not the most ethical, but I did a whole deep dive article on it, and I was like, oh man. So there are actually a lot of websites that are alternatives, which is really, really great. There's one called Earth Hero, and they are like very sustainably and eco-minded. Like that's kind of like their thing. So that's a big place. It kind of like depends on what you want to order. Like I think Amazon still is like the biggest, like they have literally everything, and I don't think there's one site out there like that. There's a lot of alternatives. Like for example, Billions Vegans is another website that's like they are branding themselves as like the vegan Amazon. And so they're really great too, because they have like lots of food items, and they also have like vegan beauty products and like vegan home and lifestyle products. So that's a really cool one as well. And we just got some stuff from there. Public Goods, which is like it's like a membership platform where you pay a small yearly membership, and then you get things like at cost or whatever. It's kind of like Brandless, if people know about that one. I think they closed actually, but yeah, and they have like a whole zero waste section of their website where they have stuff like little reusable straws and little produce bags or whatever, just stuff like that. And I like that they have all their products marked like eco-friendly or vegan or cruelty-free and GMO-free or whatever. And yeah, Billions Vegans and Earth Hero have those labels as well. And yeah, then for like clothes, this will be the last one because otherwise I just keep like rattling things off. But like, yeah, clothes like Done Good is a really good website for ethical, like it's just a kind of a grouping of like more clothes and lifestyle goods, and they group it by like clothes like H&M but like more ethical or whatever, so I guess they're kind of more on the fashion side of things. Because yeah, that's something that like I hadn't ever thought about. I'd never really ordered much online before, but obviously with having to furnish kind of an apartment in pandemic times when stores weren't open, when we moved to our apartment, we had to order some things online, and I was just like, I'm very much like, I want to put my money where my mouth is. Like, that's why I'm vegan. Like, I want to pay to support things that I believe in. So I was like, I don't believe in Amazon. I don't want to give them my money if I can avoid it. So that's where that all came in. So I think that's interesting that you brought it up. Yeah. I'm on a mission with that one too.
No, I love that because that's something like I didn't, know really. Well, I knew that Amazon wasn't maybe like the most ethical, but like these other sites that you recommended, I was unaware. So I'm really excited to check them out, and I'll be sure to link the post that you did in the show notes so people can check it out. But I feel like over the years, you've really grown to be more conscious about like sustainability and how to just kind of better take care of Earth. Like, what other things or what else could you add to that you feel like you've really gained over the years of, slow traveling, house sitting, and just like living abroad and living this nomadic lifestyle?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing would be time. It's given me time, free time, really. It's given me free time to even think about all these things. It's not I wouldn't be thinking about all these things if I was just being super working a lot and just working, coming home, making myself dinner, falling asleep, repeat the cycle the next day, So I just would never have the time to even think about making more ethical, conscious choices because I'd just be on a treadmill, that kind of thing. So it really, the biggest thing has been free time. House sitting enables us to keep our costs low so we don't have to make more money. We can spend our time on our projects and growing our passion projects and our income over time, not like, oh, I have to do this job or I have to take this client that I don't want to or whatever just because I need to like make rent. So it really just gives so much freedom. And yeah, with that freedom and time, I've been able to just explore myself and my interests more even, and just like spending time on things that I wouldn't have had the time to spend doing normally, like even things that aren't related to what we're working on at all, just things that I just doing things for the enjoyment of doing them and not feeling bad about that, whether that's I love to read a lot, or I used to play flute and I got my flute out of storage. So I've been doing that, just stuff like that. I think there's not enough priority on leisure time in American culture in particular. That's something that Spain definitely taught me is people aren't so focused on work as identity there. I was really struck by the fact that when you meet people in Spain, they don't ask what you do for work as like the first question. Like I had some friends who like we never talked about work at all. Versus in the US in particular, I feel like, I mean, I know this happens other places too, like the UK or Australia or whatever, but I'm obviously coming from here. It's that real priority about work is your identity. And obviously, like what I do now is kind of like really wrapped up in my identity, like being a blogger and a podcaster and talking about all these things that I love, but I never would have been able to do that without just real long stretches of time reflecting on what I wanted out of life, how I wanted to spend my time, what I wanted it to look like, and I just realized I just don't want to spend my time working for someone else. I want to work on my own stuff and make that happen. And yeah, I just don't think that would have happened without all the experiences and the time that living in abroad and traveling full time has really given me.
I really love that answer. I feel like it's so true. And also for me as well, coming back to the US, that's always the question, like, what do you do? And it really just kind of puts you on the spot. Like, oh my gosh, I need to know what I do. Otherwise, like, they're not important or whatever, you know? And so I really love how you've been able to really find your passions that really do help like identify you, but you're doing those things because you genuinely like love it and you have a passion for it, not because you feel like you have to do it, you know, because society is telling you to do it. And I think, yeah, we do kind of take time for granted. And especially like coming from cultures like the US and stuff, that everything always has to be rushed when in reality it doesn't. So I can totally understand how life abroad really brings you that time and just that kind of calmness to just be able to just enjoy life for the moment and not always having to think like two steps ahead all the time and feeling rushed. So so I really like loved your answer, and I totally understand it and I get it. And I think that's where I kind of struggle too, being back in the US is a little bit like I feel like I'm always having to be doing something or rushing something instead of just like relaxing. So
Yeah, especially like in the big cities for sure. You know, every time I go back to New York, I just feel sucked into it again. So it's kind of hard. I love New York in some ways, and in other ways, it's like the hustle is really really difficult. I don't know without that contrast coming back from Spain if I would have made the same realizations. I guess.
yeah, like how'd you maybe you moved abroad to like the UK or something, you know, like if you went to another culture that was quite similar, you probably would have never realized it. But because Spanish culture is so vastly different compared to the US, like yeah, you're able to recognize like the difference like right away. But
Hmm.
but I truly just enjoyed hearing your story as to how you've been able to just kind of create this life on your own terms. And I want to ask you, like, if someone else is wanting to pursue this kind of life of, you know, being nomadic and house sitting and whatnot, like what advice would you give that person?
Yeah, I would say, especially now, really important would be to build a safety security net, because like we were talking about, anything can happen. Obviously these are kind of unprecedented times, but things can always happen on the road, and you really want to be prepared for that. And unfortunately, I think too many people learn that lesson the hard way. So what I mean by that is just like having a safety net of like savings, so that like if something falls through or whatever happens, you need to buy a last minute flight, whatever it is, that you have the financial security to do that and be like, this really sucks right now, but like I can get myself out of the situation because I have the funds to support myself. So yeah, just kind of like doing some planning in advance to make sure you have your own back in the future, I guess, so to speak. And yeah, and then just going for it. Honestly, I think I've seen too many people, and especially now that I've been doing this for some time, people are like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I could do, what you do." And all the time, the people that are saying that could do that. They just, put it off, or they're afraid, and those are very real things to feel. Not discounting that at all, but like at some point, you're just gonna have to like jump off that ledge, and you're gonna have to do it. Otherwise, you're gonna be waiting for the perfect moment. Um, and yeah, at some point you're just gonna have to go. So I would say once you have all your ducks in a row, to just go for it.
No, I 100% agree with both those answers. Just do it and make sure you can get yourself out of a hole if you ever fall into one. So, no, but I love that. So, where can people follow you? I mean, you have so much good content and info to share with people. So, where can people find it? How can people connect with you?
Yeah, so alternativetravelers.com would be the best place to go. Everything lives there. So yeah, if people are interested in learning more about house sitting, we have our book, the House Sitting Handbook, and that's just right on the front page there. Also, our podcast, the Alternative Travelers podcast, is wherever you listen to podcasts. So just you can find it there. And it's also on the website as well. Everything is on alternativetravelers.com. And I should say alternative travelers, like American spelling, not like British spelling with two L's. So, and yeah, in terms of social media, the best place is Instagram at alternative travelers. is where I'm most active. So people can definitely connect over there as well.
Perfect. Yes. Follow her if you don't, and definitely check out her website at alternativetravelers.com. A lot of good info there. It was such a pleasure to have you, Sam. Thank you so much. I definitely hope to have you on the show again soon.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I had a great time.
For more information on travel and life abroad, go to VentureEtte.com. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know by leaving a review. And be sure to follow me at VentureEtte on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Safe travels, and until next time.